On January 20, 2025, the day of his inauguration, President Donald Trump again pressed the European Union to increase purchases of American oil and gas, warning that failure to do so would result in tariffs. He insisted that the simplest solution for the EU was to buy more U.S. energy resources, threatening, "We will straighten that out with tariffs, or they have to buy our oil and gas." His broader aim is to reduce the U.S. trade deficit with the EU, which he has linked to the need for increased European imports of American energy. However, the EU as a whole cannot directly commit its 27 member states to large-scale purchases, creating a diplomatic and logistical challenge. In December 2024, President Trump used his Truth Social platform to underline his threat of tariffs if the EU did not comply. He emphasized strong action and has a history of using such measures to push for higher European imports of American energy. Recent executive orders and policy moves by the Trump administration indicate potential shifts in the transatlantic relationship, affecting trade, energy, defense, and international relations. The immediate focus is on trade, where threatened tariffs on European goods would pose risks to industries such as automotive manufacturing and agriculture. At the same time, Trump's push for larger U.S. energy exports clashes with the EU's transition toward renewables, a key aspect of its climate agenda. European leaders may see these tactics as a form of pressure that undermines free trade principles. In the sphere of energy and climate policy, the Trump administration's withdrawal from the Paris Agreement weakens global efforts to tackle climate change and complicates international climate diplomacy. The EU, having long presented itself as a climate leader, must now work more intensely with other major economies like China and India to make progress without U.S. support. On top of this, Trump's declaration of a national energy emergency to expand domestic oil and gas production affects global prices, potentially making renewables in Europe less competitive and raising consumer costs. Defense and foreign policy have also been impacted. President Trump has urged NATO members to boost defense spending to 5% of GDP, far beyond the previous 2% target. This creates financial strain on European countries already facing economic challenges. Leaders like French President Emmanuel Macron have argued that Europe needs greater responsibility for its own defense, although making this shift will demand time and significant political effort. Meanwhile, Trump's pledge to resolve the Ukraine conflict within 6 months could prioritize U.S. aims over European security interests, possibly destabilizing the region and leaving European nations to handle the aftermath. In terms of wind energy, a new executive order signed by President Trump suspending fresh federal offshore wind leases and cutting back on support for renewable projects has critical implications for European wind energy manufacturers. 3 leading European wind energy firms, Vestas from Denmark, Siemens Gamesa from Spain and Germany, and Nordex SE from Germany, could experience diminished access to the expanding U.S. offshore wind market. This situation might disrupt existing partnerships, shrink revenue streams, and intensify competition in alternative regions such as Asia and Latin America. While Europe views wind power as essential to its own renewable strategy, any blow to major players like Vestas or Siemens Gamesa may weaken research and development, job creation, and broader investment in the sector. European Union officials, who had already been striving to address various energy issues, now face additional complications. The EU's long-standing challenges have been aggravated by Ukraine's cessation of Russian gas transit. Ukraine refused to renew its contract, halting Russian gas flows to Europe and contributing to a more volatile energy landscape. At the same time, mounting trade tensions with the U.S., as the Trump administration pressures the EU to buy more American LNG, add another layer of difficulty. Qatar, a critical LNG supplier, has warned it may stop exports to the EU over regulatory disputes, while Azerbaijan's sudden cessation of gas deliveries to Serbia and Bulgaria has highlighted vulnerabilities in the region's energy supply. As a result, Europe is gripped by a major energy crisis in 2025. It was triggered by Ukraine's decision not to continue transiting Russian gas, along with Qatar's threats to halt LNG shipments because of stricter regulations, and the U.S. urging Europeans to ramp up American LNG imports. Azerbaijan, a crucial source for Eastern European nations like Serbia and Bulgaria, has also cut off gas flows. These factors together endanger the stability of Europe's energy supply and raise economic and security concerns across the continent. In Serbia, Gas shipments from Azerbaijan have been halted under force majeure conditions, according to President Alexander Vučić. Serbia, which needs roughly 1.7 million cubic meters of gas per day from Azerbaijan, has tapped into strategic reserves as a stopgap, but its annual consumption exceeds 3 billion cubic meters. The loss of Azerbaijani gas spotlights Serbia's continuing dependence on Russian imports and underscores its need for diversification. Bulgaria experienced similar disruptions tied to technical difficulties at Azerbaijan's Shah Deniz Alpha platform. Although Bulgaria has partly reduced its reliance on Russian supplies by sourcing LNG through Greek terminals, a temporary halt to Azerbaijani gas raises questions about the resilience of its energy system. Azerbaijan's central role in the EU's southern gas corridor strategy emphasizes why such disruptions pose a serious threat. The country delivered 9.4 billion cubic meters to the EU in the first 9 months of 2024 and plans to reach 20 billion by 2027, but technical and geopolitical problems reveal the precarious nature of these supply chains. Qatar, another key LNG supplier, objects to the EU's Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, claiming the regulations would harm its revenues to the point that continuing exports might be untenable. Qatar's Minister of Energy, Saad Al-Kaabi, has warned that an onerous 5% global revenue penalty is unacceptable. While Qatar has shifted much of its LNG deliveries to Asia, it is expanding its production by 2027 and could still be a valuable supplier for Europe if regulatory hurdles are resolved. A suspension of Qatari LNG flows would make Europe's situation even more precarious, as gas storage has been drawn down at a faster rate since late 2024. The expiration of the Russia-Ukraine transit agreement on January 1, 2025, ended half a century of reliable gas flows along that route. Countries like Slovakia and Hungary, which depended heavily on Russian supplies, face higher costs by turning to pricier alternatives such as LNG. Benchmark gas prices in Europe have spiked, and reserves are being used at an alarming pace. Legal disputes and geopolitical tensions derailed any attempts to extend the Ukraine transit deal, and other pipelines like Turk Stream and Nord Stream either lack the capacity to fully substitute or are offline due to damage. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico has made the renewal of gas transit a priority, citing the burden of increased expenses on Slovakia. He has even threatened countermeasures against Ukraine, such as suspending emergency electricity exports, vetoing EU assistance for Kyiv, and canceling benefits for Ukrainian refugees. In an effort to find solutions, Slovakia's gas utility SPP is exploring swaps with Azerbaijan, under which an Azeri company would buy Russian gas and send an equivalent amount to Europe. However, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is firmly opposed to any indirect financing of Russia. Despite attempts at diversification, Central European nations remain significantly reliant on Russian gas. Ending the Ukrainian corridor raises import costs and undermines regional competitiveness, especially if a harsh winter further tests available supplies. Rising costs for households and industries could lead to more inflationary pressure, complicating the area's economic outlook and Europe's diplomatic strategies. Meanwhile, Russia has maintained robust energy revenues by pivoting its exports to China and India, now accounting for over 3/4 of its crude oil shipments, as well as to Saudi Arabia. India and China have also sent more refined products to Europe, effectively bridging some gaps left by reduced Russian exports. All these factors converge into a deepening energy crisis for the EU. Azerbaijan's unexpected shortfall, a harsh winter, and weaker output from renewables like wind and solar bring underlying structural weaknesses into sharp relief. The Trump administration's opposition to offshore wind projects in the US further constrains European wind manufacturers who had bet on growth there. By pulling back from supporting renewable energy, the US reduces the momentum of worldwide climate initiatives, forcing the EU to fill the gap. In the near term, the EU will likely resort to subsidies or energy rationing to shield consumers from price hikes and potential shortages. In the long run, a more robust plan is needed to expand renewables, energy storage, and transmission infrastructure. Establishing stronger partnerships with non-Russian suppliers and fostering better coordination among EU members will be essential for enduring resilience. Whether the EU can manage these overlapping crises depends on prompt collective responses. The way leaders tackle immediate problems, alongside finding workable solutions for cleaner energy and competitive markets, will have lasting implications for Europe's energy security, economic stability, and global leadership in the shift toward sustainable energy. That concludes today's discussion. Remember to stay engaged and informed about ongoing developments.